All right, hey, welcome back to the Pedalboard building series. If you watched the first video, I just gave an overview of this particular pedal board that I'm in the process of building right now. But this video is just gonna camp out on my favorite tools and my favorite components to use. So what cable do I like? What plugs do I like? What soldering equipment and other miscellaneous tools might be helpful. So I'm going to try to link a more full list of tools in the description. So if you just want to jump to that right now, you can. But all of these things that I say and probably more will be listed in the description or some kind of document that you can have. After I was all done recording that section, I forgot to mention one thing, so I'm back here just to fill you in. It's not a tool, perhaps, as far as a physical tool, but a digital tool that I feel like is indispensable for designing a pedal board and putting one together is pedalplayground.com. If you haven't seen pedalplayground.com, they have a way to digitally kind of lay out your pedal board and graphically, and it's very, very good. Their pedal collection is huge. There's some other ones. I think Temple Audio actually has their own, and there might be a few others out there. But this particular one I found to have the biggest library of pedals. So if you're looking to find a great resource to kind of pre-arrange your pedals, this is what I would recommend. And you could see my layout here. I was experimenting with a whole bunch of stuff down here. I was playing to see if like the Kernum Ridge could fit in certain places, and I wasn't totally accurate with some of my measurements on here, but I got pretty close. I was trying to see if this Poly Bebo would fit here, where the HX Stomp ended up. I was just trying to see if this would fit anywhere, and it just won't. And I was trying to see if I could cram the drop in somewhere. But anyway, I was just playing around with all these things, and it's super cool. They didn't have the Schnobeltone daily driver, and so I just made it, and you can do that too. So you can add a custom pedal here. But like I said, you start with your pedal board, and they've got a ton of pedal boards ready to go in here. So select the pedal board, and the graphics are really good. I'm just super impressed with all this stuff. And so if you want to just you can rotate things, and move them forward and backwards and stuff like that. And then pedals. It's just got a huge list. You could see it just goes on and on and on, all the pedals they have in their library. I don't even know what this is, but they've got it, and you can rotate it and put it on your board. So if you wanted to add a custom one, you can name it and select a color, then add custom pedal, and it'll show up like that. So this is just a great resource if you're building a board and need a way to arrange it. So let's talk about the plugs that I like the most. I love Squareplug. These plugs are fantastic, especially because of the PVC-6X, and the board is so tight and compact. These are the smallest, and they're so easy to solder. Absolutely love them. So for all of my mono input jacks and output jacks, the SP400 is my go-to, and for the stereo stuff I go with the SP550S. And again, I'm going to show you some more of how to actually solder these in the next video, but just know for now that these are my favorite plugs by far. So what cable do I use with them? My favorite cable of all time for mono stuff is going to be the best-tronics, what is it? It's the CA0678 cable. So if you've not heard of BTPA.com, it is a company called Best-Tronics, and they sell a whole bunch of this stuff. And so I'd highly encourage you to head to their website and check them out. But this cable is their own cable, and it's super highly rated. And most of the last 3 revisions of my pedal boards have been built with this stuff and just one other type of cable. But if I could make everything from one cable, it would be this. Again, I'll show you how to wire this because this is a unique cable. It's a braided shield on the outside, so there's some tricks on how to solder it that I'll show you later. But this cable performs super, super well. But it is a little bit thicker, and so on the SP400, if you put it in here, the strain relief is perfect. The problem comes when you want to do some stereo stuff. And so when you're using this plug, the SP550S, that's when shoving two of these things in here can be nearly impossible. There's some workarounds. Some people have been able to get it to work, but it's very difficult. Instead, for stereo stuff, I really like to use Mogami cable for that. And this particular Mogami cable is the Mogami 2314. So typically you might see it just say Mogami 2314 or W2314. This stuff is a lot thinner, but still performs very well. It's still a great quality cable. But two of these can fit into the 550S side by side. It takes a little bit of work. Again, the next video will show you that. But on this particular pedal board build, it's essential because I'm doing so many things with the stereo inputs and outputs, the sends and returns on this guy. And so to make it work right and to solder it well, actually most of my board, because so much of it is stereo, is actually using this. So all of my overdrive pedals, the mono stuff, gets my favorite cable, the BTPA cable, and the rest of the stereo stuff and anything that gets split gets this cable. Still a great cable. Mogami also makes a cable like this. It's a 2528. In case you want a cable that comes connected together like this. This is interesting because it has one line on the outside, and so you can actually differentiate the right from the left when you're wiring it through your board, and it pops out and you want to see, you know, maybe what's the right or left channel. It's essentially the exact same cable as the 2314. It's the same as far as I can tell. You lay them side by side and look inside of them. They're pretty much identical. It's just that they are bound together. Now, obviously, you could take them apart like this and just peel them right apart if you wanted. My preference, though, I did this on my last pedal board build. This is an old cable. But when you have two cables that are connected together, it's not as easy to wire, you know, to like work them through small spaces and stuff. And so it kind of bends funny. And so I actually didn't prefer that. I do like that there's a line on it, but again, I also don't like that there's a line on it. I like being able to differentiate right from left, but I also didn't like the visual look of the line because I'm vain and I didn't want a line. So this particular build, I did away with that cable and just went with the 2314. The other connections that I really like, I used them all up, so I don't have any to show you in my hand, but I'll point to them, are these Switchcraft Midi plugs right here, which are absolutely fantastic. They're right angle. You can turn them to whatever angle you want. I'm going to have a video, again, the next video is going to show you how to solder those up, and there's a little bit of a trick to that, but once you figure it out, you can make these. I've ran cables, MIDI cables already for my whole board. It's all wired up from MIDI, and these Switchcraft MIDI plugs are fantastic. Love those guys. Now, my favorite cable that I use for MIDI stuff is the Mogami 2948 cable. And it's a 4-conductor with a shield, so that makes all 5 pins. You don't have to wire all 5 pins for a MIDI cable, but usually it's just the center 3. But whenever I'm wiring up a MIDI cable, I just wire all 5 because I don't know if I ever use that cable for anything else that perhaps needs all 5 connected. I just want it there just in case. And so this particular Mogami MIDI cable has 5 conductors total, and it works really well. It doesn't really need any extra strain relief. It's easy to cut. It's the shielding's easy to get around. Again, the next video will have more descriptions on that, but this is my favorite MIDI cable to use with that kind of stuff. So for straight plugs, I recently found the SPS4, I believe is what they're called. It's Squareplug, and it's just a simple a set screw or two of them on each side of this cable to secure those into place. Really easy to solder, very secure. All that. I love those ones. But then these ones are also great. These BTPA plugs, I forgot the name, so I'll write them below. But they come with strain relief already kind of built in to the bottom end. So with their cable, that BTPA cable, and their short stubby ends, these guys are great. So I love those ones as well. So either those ones or the square plugs for if you want straight plugs, those are fantastic as well. And then I'll also point out these right angle XLRs. Again, I kind of forgot the name right now, so I'll just write it below. And again, the link will be there as well. But these XLR connectors are right angle, and in a pedal board like this, totally essential. And so got two of those hardwired to these Neutrik jacks on the side. So let's just talk about those jacks while we're at it. All of the side jacks. So most of these are Neutrik D-panel mount jacks, and this is a Powercon jack. I'll talk about that in a second. My input though, I went with kind of a standard one just because actually these were giving me some issues, and so these locking Neutrik ones, so I just kind of punted and went with the standard input jack just for security, but I may switch it out. Maybe I just had a bad one, but I'm using the XLR Neutrik ones. These guys, I believe, I forget exactly where I ordered them, but they came already mounted. But again, they're just traditional, again, because I had kind of some issues with these, so I'm gonna experiment with that a little bit. But my dry out has the Neutrik locking ones, and then the Neutrik USB, and these are reversible too. So this is USB, I believe that's B. You can flip that around, so this side could be USB A, kind of the rectangular one. They also make USB-C ones now. They also make Midi ones that I'll put on the other side as well. And so Neutrik makes a ton of these panel mounted jacks, and it really makes the side customizable. To go along with my favorite plugs, you also need, if you're for a pedal board build like this, you need a right angle USB B to USB A cable. And these previously had been kind of hard to find online, but lately I've been able to find them on Amazon, and they've all worked great. And so right now I have 4 of them on my board. I have one for each of the Tone X pedals, and then one for the Mastermind, and then I just had to order one last one for my HX Stomp because the one I had previously was too short. And so anyway, if you're looking for a right angle USB cable, I will link to that in the description as well. But these are great. If you do have a hard time finding them on Amazon, if they're sold out for some reason, look up StarTech. They're a little bit more expensive, but they're a highly rated cable or whatever. But if it works, it works, especially for the USB stuff. But I love these, and again, the link is in the description. So for my power jacks, I love using these all black NA-C3FXW top plugs, and it's a Neutrik Powercon jack. So those are great. Any old power cable is great. You just snip off the end and, throw one of these on. Very easy to just strip, and then they clamp down in here, and they make a cable that looks like this when it's all done. So these are great. They totally lock into place, super secure, just like, a speak-on connector, and they won't pull out. And just the way I wire my boards, one is on each side, and so I either can just plug in power from either side, or if I wanted to have kind of like a power outlet, I could on that side too. So that kind of does it for the plugs and the wire, I believe. That's mostly what I use. Now let's get into some other things. First and foremost, dual lock. This stuff, it's awesome. I kind of was against it at first. I kind of preferred traditional industrial strength Velcro, but the more and more I use, build pedal boards, just this stuff is great. But I've had to buy like 3 rolls of this stuff from Amazon. I don't know of a really, really cheap place to buy it. BTPA sells this by the foot. So if you're making an order, you can order it that way. It's a little cheaper than Amazon, but not by much. To do an entire pedal board like this, you might need like 3 rolls of this, depending on how much you put on. But there's some amazing tricks that you can do with dual lock that I have utilized a ton on this board. And so just kind of wanted to show you a little bit about how you can use dual lock. You can use dual lock if you stack it like this on top of each other, like that, and then do another one just like that. You can keep on stacking dual lock on top of each other to make kind of like a little riser. And so I've done that on a number of my pedals on this particular build. I've done that on the PBC6X. The front has just a single layer, but then the back has like I think it's a double layer, and that picks the back up off the board just enough to be able to get those square plugs facing down. And so it's a very convenient way if you need anything raised. I also have my volume pedal raised a little bit. I think this one's just double as well, and that makes it so that it doesn't sit lower than my PBC6X, so that if my foot sits on, I'm not tempted to accidentally hit a switch. It's still possible, but raising it helps a little bit. And then my little tuner back here, I raised that guy up. I think that one's like quad stacked or something like that, because it sat really low and I just visually wanted it a little higher. So that was great for that. Then I also double stacked, or actually just a single layer underneath this the Goodwood Lift riser, and I did that just to bring the whole riser up just a little tiny bit before I locked it down, and that allowed it to clear, not hitting my Tonex pedals. And so there's just so many cool ways that you can use dual lock, and it's super secure and great. I actually still need to dual lock my Mobius and Timeline. I've done my Big Sky, so you can see there's a little lip right there. But these ones are actually currently using the former style of there is a different kind of dual lock, just so you can be aware of. And it's a lot thinner, it's a lot cheaper, but it doesn't hold your pedals as well. It does work though, so if you're tight on a budget and want to use this stuff, it is cheaper, and it's thinner. If you don't want your dual lock to raise your pedals, if you want to keep them as flush as possible to the ground, you can use this other form of dual lock, and it still works. So like I said, I have it on my Mobius and Timeline right now, and they've been, they've stayed in place pretty well, but I will convert to the other stuff just to make them all uniform. But dual lock is your friend. Now, I will say with Velcro, and especially with dual lock, you need a way, once you're populating your board, you need a way to be able to get your pedals off easier. So especially with a board like this, any board where there's pedals that are really tight together, you need a way to get them off. And I found this set of nylon pry tools at Harbor Freight for like $3.99 for a set of 4 of them. And this one's kind of my favorite because it has a 45-degree angle right there. I think it's for automotive purposes, but you can very, very easily just go underneath the pedal and pry it up, and it just pops right off. The dual lock comes right off, and then it's easy to just, pop your pedal back on. But when you're trying to get off like a volume pedal or anything like that with lots of dual lock on it, or if you're trying to get into a hard space like this daily driver back here is kind of awkward because it's way back here, you can just slide this thing underneath, pop it up, and it's out. And so I really recommend some sort of nylon, or plastic, whatever, pry tool so that you don't damage your pedals, and something that you can pop them off. I want to show you guys just how handy these things are. Again, you could use anything, but the fact that they're nylon really helps not destroy stuff. So obviously you can use it to, pry up pedals from, the dual lock. But they also, especially with these switchers, this RJM switcher, they come in handy really well when you want to take in and out certain loops, certain plugs from the loop. So let me demonstrate that for you. So as I've been building this board and kind of putting these in, I've been using, like I mentioned earlier, the Deoxit D5 to clean out. So I've been spraying these in the sends and returns of each loop and then kind of working the jacks in and out. But sometimes once you get, kind of compact in here, it's really hard. So this particular one allows me to just like stick it straight down in and pop out these super easy. Otherwise, it's kind of difficult to do with just your fingers. And so, as I have to exercise these, I'll, put it in and take it out over and over. And it's super easy just to kind of work it in and work that Deoxit all around. But even if you weren't doing the Deoxit, you just wanted to take these things out as you're building your board, these are just super handy. So it came in a 4-pack. This was one of them. I use this most often for Velcro. It's got an angled side and a flat side, but this one's really handy. This little end for these plugs. So just a little tip there. A couple other tools that you're gonna need for putting a pedal board together. Obviously a screwdriver, but not just any screwdriver. You need a screwdriver, especially if you're gonna use these square plugs. You're gonna need a screwdriver that the tip goes in these plugs very well, because there's going to be times when you have to really tighten these things, and having a tip that is perfectly designed for these is going to be essential. So I found this Cusack turn-a-screw screwdriver online. Again, I'll link it, and it has, it's like a 6-way tool. It has flathead and Phillips head, and then this is, a tool, and then you could flip the whole thing around, and it's a bigger size. So, but I find myself, for the majority of the stuff I do, just using that smaller one, and that works really great for that. The other thing that I bought when I bought that was these plastic nut drivers. They're called rocket sockets, and they are an amazing tool to, if you ever need to replace or tighten a jack or a switch or anything, and you don't want to grab a crescent wrench and kind of go to town on your pedals. These have like a ton of different sizes for all the purposes of here, and so you can just put them on a pedal and turn it, and it's plastic, so it's not going to hurt the nut, and it's going to tighten it really tight and unscrew it really easily. And there's all different sizes in here. It also works on your guitar, so your input jack on your guitar. So picking these up is just like a great handy thing to have around. I got these because when I was building my kind of rehoused secret preamp, I wanted a easy way to kind of get all the jacks and the knobs on there easily, and this was awesome. So I love that for that purpose. The other screwdriver thing that has just totally come in handy over the years. I believe I got this at Home Depot. I'm not even sure if I can link it because I don't know exactly, but I'll try. But it's this multi-set of tools, and this particular one right here has come in handy because this is what you need to screw on these the Midi connections on the Switchcraft. It's kind of like this star bit thing, and then it has just like a whole bunch of really small Phillips head and flathead and hex and different things. Has an extension tool on it. So this is like, I absolutely love this thing. Have to have it when I'm working with wiring. I keep it handy all the time, so I love that guy. I also love this, I think it's called One-Wrap, if I'm not mistaken, but it's Velcro, but it's just kind of like this continuous strip. And I'll use this on the underside of my board to wrap cables together. Again, I'm not the cleanest wirer. And so instead of zip ties though, I'll often use this stuff because it's very easy to take off and put back on. So just a little hack if you don't want to use zip ties and you want things more easily serviceable, if you will. This stuff rocks. Recommend it. Now, before I start talking about soldering equipment, I want to just give a huge shout out to Deoxit D5. Now, this stuff has really brought to life my equipment in a really cool way. I've had some jacks that have been intermittent, and I spray this inside the pedal. You can spray it right in the input and the output jack of your pedals. It's scary because it's like wet and you're like, I'm gonna ruin it. No, it will not ruin it. You spray it in the input jack, take a plug, and you work the plug in and out of the jack several times to kind of break up the junk. This stuff restores it, it cleans it, it protects it, it increases the connectivity and all your stuff. So as I have been rewiring this board, every single time I solder a cable and plug it in, I'm squirting a little bit of this in there and then working the socket a bit. And this I learned from Vertex and some other guys. So I highly recommend this for just general maintenance and just making your tone sparkle and keeping things clean. All right, now onto some soldering tools specifically. The brand doesn't totally matter on these guys. Obviously, you're gonna need wire strippers. I have two different sizes. I have one that's 12 to 20, and then another one that is 26 to 16. And I'll kind of use them for different purposes and different size wire. But just, you know, the higher quality you can afford, the better. Obviously, the sharper they are, the easier they're going to cut and all that kind of thing. And just clean wiring when you're soldering is pretty important. So these guys, one of them's a Klein, one of them's Greenlee. Doesn't really matter as long as you have strippers that can cover all the size wire that you're using. I think that's what's really important. And so for the cable that I recommended, I will often have to kind of use both of these, one for the outer and another one for the inner. Maybe they make a tool that you can just use one tool and it has all the different sizes, but these work for me and I had them around. You also need some sort of cutter, and I actually just recently purchased these guys, and they're a flush cutter, which has actually just really helped in a lot of different applications. I'll show you again kind of how I use these in my soldering video in the next video, but these are great, and I picked them up from, I think, Stompbox Parts. Again, I'll link it in the description below, and I highly recommend these guys. This wire brush, you're like, this is not a solder tool. Well, no, it's not, but for the BTPA cable, and again, I'm going to show this to you in the next video on how to solder it up. This guy comes in handy, and I'll show you that. So because of a braided cable, you need a way to kind of like thin out and get that braid out. And there's kind of two simultaneous methods for that. One is the next tool I'll show you, and the other one you can really get it out with this brush. So I really recommend this if you're using that BTPA cable. All right, let's get into the soldering stuff really quick. So I have a Weller soldering iron. I don't know, it's not the highest rated thing out there. It's a WLC 100, and I typically set it to 4. Maybe I'm doing something wrong, but it's worked for me, and I've wired tons of boards with this guy, and it works great. I did end up picking up new tips for it though, which I'm not exactly sure where I got those, but getting kind of a high quality, well-formed tip for that end is pretty important. And so the ones I found worked pretty well, and I enjoy that. So make sure you do that. The solder that I use is this Kester, I don't know. I'll write something below, but I believe someone recommended this to me in a forum. So this exact kind, it's 0.8 millimeters. It's got a whole bunch of numbers on it, and I'm sure it means something to people who do a lot of wiring. but I did try to buy good solder. Now, what I do, a long time ago, like when I first started soldering, I picked up this tub of this little canister of solder from Radio Shack, and I didn't really like the method that some use, where they put this on a spool, right, and then just kind of drag this and use it. There's times when I don't know, I found that kind of cumbersome. The wire is kind of stretched over your project, and wasn't that easy to maneuver. And so to me, this is like a great way to use it. So I took this little bottle and I drilled a hole in the top, and then when I want to refill it, I'll just take that solder, I'll take this stuff, right, and then wrap it around like a screwdriver or something and make kind of a circle little slinky or whatever. Drop it in there, again, poke it through the hole, and you'll see this more in action in the next video. But I'll just take this out with my thumb and forefinger, and as I'm working on the project like this, keep on kind of feeding it out like this, and it works super well. And I just dig this method. This can like hang out on your desk anywhere. You could be working on something, grab it and push the solder in, and it works great. So something like that, however you want to deal with that, that's fine, but that's a little hack that I do. Also picked up this, instead of a wet sponge that some people use to kind of clean up solder, this gold steel wool thing works really good, and you don't have to make sure it's constantly wet. You can just, so if your soldering iron is a little dirty, you just scrape it in there and it cleans it up. Again, no water, no mess that way. And this has lasted me a long time, and it came with some other things, I think just Amazon or somewhere. So pick one of those up. For soldering, you're going to need a desoldering braid, especially if you make any mistakes or want to reuse plugs and you want to get the solder off. You know, haven't always found like the very best one. This stuff can be kind of hard to work with. You got to kind of like push it together, kind of loosen the braids a little bit, and then sometimes you need some rosin or some Flux, I think is what it's called. And so I got this a long time ago, again from Radio Shack. It's super hard to open because the stuff is super sticky. But if you put a tiny dab of this Flux on the desoldering braid or on anything, if you're having a hard time getting the solder to melt, this will help it melt really quickly. And so I keep that around just for kind of stubborn instances. So desoldering braid. I also have a tip tinner. This is really great when you're just starting out a project. If my soldering iron's not on right now, if I were to turn it on, wait for it to heat up, the first thing that I would do is I would tin it with this, and that just kind of coats the outside, protects it, and gets it ready to solder. So I keep tip tinner around all the time. Now this is the other tool, just some tweezers. Now these are like really super fine tweezers with sharp ends, and I love these guys. I use them all the time to kind of manipulate and maneuver wires. They're very handy, very useful. Again, I don't exactly even know where to pick these guys up, but something like this will come in handy. Again, the next video will show you how I use them when I'm actually soldering. Just a couple more things. I love this little vise right here. It's super convenient to hold the plugs. I believe, again, I saw this on a Vertex video, and just set it down, open it up like this, especially for square plugs. It has a little notch, and tighten it down, and just like that, you're ready to roll. Unscrew that and begin soldering. And it can hold, you know, much bigger stuff too. It can hold the Switchcraft stuff, it can hold the Midi stuff, it can hold anything. So this little vise is super good. And then I also kind of pair it with these quad hands. This is kind of my last tool that I just wanted to show that I use a lot. And these arms, you can kind of put them wherever you want and they stay. So if you want to set this sort of in front of the vise like that, and these guys can hold your wires while you're working on the project down here. So again, this always sits really close to my vise, kind of like that, and I use it all the time. Lastly, a multimeter. Now, I'm really not an electronics expert. I really don't know a whole lot about this stuff, and all this land kind of confuses me. But there's one feature on here that's super handy, and that's just the sound mode. So there's a mode on here that when you touch the two probes together, it makes a little beep. And so it's a great way to check the connectivity between things. So if you want to make sure the tip and the sleeve weren't shorting out on a plug, you can do that. You can trace stuff and see, you know, what is connected. And so when you're making cables, if you don't have a cable tester and you have an old multimeter just laying around somewhere and it has a sound mode on it, you can do that to test cables and test the path between things. Honorable mention to a Great pair of scissors. These titanium non-stick scissors are fantastic for cutting the dual lock and whatever else you need cut. You're going to need scissors. Dual lock is annoying, leaves the residue on stuff. These non-stick versions help with that, and they're super sharp. So there you go. All right, those are my most loved and used soldering tools. What did I miss? What did you find that blew your mind, that gave you all the soldering advice in the world? You know, where do I need to learn? Drop that in the comments below. If it was helpful for you, like it. Again, see the description for the links and all that other stuff. And I invite you to check me out at thetoneshepherd.com, and also follow me on Instagram at thetoneshepherd. And then watch the next video if you want to learn how I solder things up and kind of use some of these tools in a real board making scenario. So thanks again for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.